we are facing a very critical situation that is now tapped. For a long time ago, we suffered a crisis. A human crisis that makes every day 100,000 people die of hunger and many other by conflicts. To this human crisis and crisis of values, joined him in 2008 an economic crisis that hit the developing countries, leading them gradually become poor countries, plunging the nations, destroying jobs, causing families to lose their home, carrying out rights and liberties cuts. All while our political leaders wasted thousands and thousands of millions and served to the financial and economic elite that governs this system and causes all these evils. Many are those who think that this crisis is casual, something that usually happens from time to time like a meteorological event it were, without realizing that it is a part of a planning of the financial and economic elite to drag humanity to a desired chaos, and then to impose a desired order as a solution, and then to get more control of the citizens, depriving them of rights and freedoms which both cost to get, and now we are slowly losing. We face an elite that controls the media, transnational corporations, banks, governments, and that we see how every day is working through their puppets, the politicians, to take us to the chaos, causing sieges in the economy, government crisis, political corruption. These tapes, they are very close to the ultimate goal. But what remains for this group to do that they have not yet done? What more left to do? Besides the economic crisis, we find another growing crisis, an international diplomatic crisis over Syria, which seems to predict we are close to a global conflict. The direct support to Syria by Iran and Russia in the event that the USA and Israel attack Syria could aggravate the situation in the Middle East, making to Russia and Iran enter the conflict. And if Iran is subsequently attacked by the USA, China will intervene on this conflict due to the oil interest that the country has with Iran, even if it means a world war. But who get benefits from an intervention in Syria and Iran? From a political point, as we know, the US needs oil to cope with the economic crisis. Iran has been a long time trying to disentangle its oil from the dollar, something which will affect negatively to the US economy. It's something that USA is not gonna allow. At the same time, to keep itself as the fast economy against the threat of China, between other reasons. From an economical point of view, the economic and financial elite has always got great benefits with world wars, selling weapons, giving money to both sides. Wars are business. Our common enemy is preparing the scenario for the chaos. They are using all their tools to carry us to disaster. And while they do it, they keep us entertained, distracted from what really matters. They will use to the puppets, the politicians, for their ultimate goal, to summit the nations, while they provoke revolutions, destabilizing governments, making to the people lose hope in everything. They are closed, so close to get their final objective. What will humanity do? Will we get united and fight against this criminal system? Will we abandon ourselves to our own luck? This situation is comparable to a game of cards between two opponents. One is the lead that governs us, who have spent almost all his cards, only have one on hand, while we, the other player, has almost all the cards in our hand. Few of them have been used without obtaining great success. Our enemy seems to have the victory in hand. It only remains one last move. A final action on this long and greedy plan. A final card.
Ladies and gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no secret is revealed. That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon decreed it a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy. I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
I could not be sure if was this speech what killed the president, but certainly his words are right. Through the history, a group of people have been taking control of the system through the economy, finance, and who controls the money controls the world, of course. And that includes politics, media communications, between others. An elite that even has nuclear weapons. This elite is composed by the Rockefeller, which is an important and recognized American family whose members have had a great performance in business and politics on his country. The dynasty was founded by John Rockefeller, who created a vast business empire, especially in the oil sector. The family has business leaders, executives, and prominent politicians. They are considered as one of the most famous and powerful families in the United States and world. The Rothschilds, known as the House of Rothschilds or simply the Rothschilds, is a European dynasty who founded some banks and financial institutions in the late 18th century and eventually became, from the 19th century, in one of the most influential people of European bankers and financiers. Some historical proofs of how these people have been conquering this world step by step through economic and politics. The US Senate approved in 1913 a project by the famous and powerful Rothschild family that was entitled to join economic wealth and financial objectives to the Morgan family owned an immensely influential banking and incalculable famous Rockefeller fortune. Until then, it was forbidden for foreign capital to engage at US banks, as was the case of the Rothschilds, German capital holders. The December 23, 1913, the private Federal Reserve, carried by these three families, got the control of the United States of America. These elites are guilty for the current economic crisis, the hunger, the injustice, the desiguality. All this conforms a step in the plan to take us to a global generic chaos. So far, the citizens of the countries of Europe and the USA, among others, in such a situation have been holding peaceful demonstrations and actions against this. But if we take a look to what kind of people we are facing, people who control the media, politics, economics, food, possessing nuclear weapons, we may not be doing enough to stop this group of demons. Do not think that this crisis is going to continue being just an economic crisis, as well as the economic crisis making serious and probably irreversible damage. But they want to carry it to something far beyond just economic and social problems. As I mentioned before, the US economy needs oil to keep itself as the first economy against the threat of China to become the first world economy. That is why the USA has put his eye in the Middle East, oil-rich area. That's why probably the Arab Spring calls are not random, but were triggered by the US government itself, with the help of the intelligence services, along with Israel services too, to provoke chaos in those Arab countries, introducing mercenaries and destroying these countries, and then blaming on the governments of these countries all this chaos, and to have the justification to invade the country and to take the control of the oil in that region.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, No. He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq? Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They've just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran." The truth is about the Middle East is, had there been no oil there, it would be like Africa. Nobody is threatening to intervene in Africa. The problem is the opposite. We keep asking for people to intervene and stop it. And there's no question that the presence of petroleum throughout the region has sparked great power involvement. Whether that was the specific motivation for the coup or not, I can't tell you, but there's always been this attitude that somehow we could intervene and use force in the region.
Syria and Iran seem to be the following objectives. Iran is the 3rd largest oil reserve in the world, and Syria has great quantities of gas. USA will need to get prepared to invade Syria, and then to provoke Iran, because US government knows Iran will intervene in the conflict with Syria, due to the deal made by both countries in case one of them is attacked by US or Israel. Later, USA probably will make a new false flag attack like the Twin Towers to blame on Iran.
You know, I've been in public speaking for 60 years, and what I'm about to say this afternoon may be about the most important topic, the most serious topic, and the most alarming topic that I have ever talked about in those whole 60 years. I want to talk in the same vein as Webster Tarpley on Friday about the grave threat to world peace that we face in the possibility of a U.S. attack, possibly a nuclear attack on Iran, and how important understanding the truth about 9/11 is as perhaps our best available means of forestalling that terrible possibility. Now, I'm the third person, I think, to remind you of what Brzezinski warned Congress about last February, that an attack on Iran would lead to a spreading and deepening quagmire, and that it would very probably be preceded by, and these are his words, a terrorist act in the United States blamed on Iran.
And I emphasize what I'm about to say. The final destination on this downhill track is likely to be a head-on conflict with Iran and with much of the world of Islam at large. A plausible scenario for a military collision with Iran involves Iraqi failure to meet the benchmarks, followed by accusations of Iranian responsibility for the failure, then by some provocation in Iraq or a terrorist act in the United States blamed on Iran, culminating in a quote-unquote defensive U.S. military action against Iran.
It almost sounds as if we should invite him to our conference. He doesn't say an incident by Iran, he said an incident blamed on Iran.
Or a terrorist act in the United States, blamed on Iran.
Hoy existe un riesgo inminente de guerra con empleo de ese tipo de armas. Y no albergo la menor duda de que un ataque de Estados Unidos e Israel contra la República Islámica de Irán se tornaría inevitablemente en un conflicto nuclear global.
El día que Estados Unidos ataque a Siria y Siria responda, van a culpar a Siria de por qué se defiende. Y se iniciaría, estaríamos en las puertas del inicio de la Tercera Guerra Mundial. Y Venezuela se opone al ataque de los Estados Unidos.
Here is where the big problem begins. Russia, like Iran, is one of the most important allies of Syria. And China, like Russia, is another very important ally of Iran, not letting to the USA invade this country for the oil interests, as a Chinese general said in a Chinese news program.
表示反对对伊朗实施单方面的制裁。对此，美国纽约城市大学政治学教授夏明认为，冷战结束后，美国和西方社会面临的最大挑战来自中国和伊朗，他们同样受到美国和西方的孤立，所以中国的政策是可以预见的。
中国跟伊朗呢，基本上面对着西方的政治、经济、文化的挑战，所以呢，这两个国家呢，在那个国际舞台上呢，那么基本上呢，都是有一种协调，那么也都是相互在支持。那么所以我们看到的就是说，中国呢，跟伊朗呢两个国家呢，就是说协调的也非常多。那么再就是能源呢，再就是军火各方面呢，在国际舞台上呢，都有很多的合作。
美联社23号也报道，自2006年以来，联合国对伊朗施加了4轮制裁，但伊朗的能源出口使伊朗没有因被制裁受到严重损害。法新社则说，中国支持伊朗从伊朗购买大量的石油，同时中国也是伊朗最大的交易伙伴，两国间的贸易总额达300亿美元。美国之音报道，据中国海关资料，今年伊朗可能成为中国第2大原油供应国。不过，伊朗对新一轮的制裁表示不屑。以色列和华盛顿表示，在其他努力无效的情况下，不排除军事打击。 令人费解的是，中国国防大学教授、海军少将张召忠说，中国不惜3次世界大战保伊朗。海军少将张召忠说，中国不惜3次世界大战保伊朗。国不惜3次世界大战保伊朗。国不惜3次世界大战保伊朗。
Middle East is the fuse that will pop a new global conflict that will drag all the nations of the world to disaster. In the moment that Syria is attacked, it will provoke an imbalance and chaos in the area, making Iran enter the conflict. Russia and China will come to the aid. Obama just needs a justification to invade Syria and Iran, and the fireworks will begin. USA, Russia and the United Kingdom have spent months sending troops, warships to the area, waiting for the moment. The sites are already positioned at this new war. The scenario of a world war is imminent, and just humanity can stop this genocide. When we think about the Third World War, we probably think the following two things. To not believe that will occur a world war because it will mean the end of humanity by nuclear weapons. It's definitely a smart thinking, but we have to think to how many countries it will affect in terms of nuclear attacks. That it will affect in an economic field, of course. It will intensely affect to the world economy, causing social chaos and disorder. A mess created by them to impose their solution and secondly their order. Order up chaos. Problem, reaction, solution. They provoke an economic crisis, and after a world war, they wait for the reaction, which is chaos, and then they give us the solution. Oliver Pike, an American lawyer, soldier, writer, and activist prominent Freemason, wrote in the 1871 a letter to his fellow Italian Giuseppe Mazzini, in which detailed the planning for the 3 world wars. The First World War must be brought about in order to overthrow the power of the Tsars in Russia, and of making that country a fortress of atheistic communism. The divergences caused between the British and Germanic empires will be used to foment this war. At the end of the war, communism will be built and used in order to destroy the other governments. The Second World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences between the fascist and the political Zionist. This war must be brought about so that Athens is destroyed and that the political Zionists be strong enough to institute a sovereign state of Israel in Palestine. During the Second World War, international communism must become strong enough in order to balance Christendom, which could be then restrained and held in check until the time when we will need it for the final social cataclysm. The Third World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences caused between the political Zionists and the leaders of the Islamic world. The war must be conducted in such a way that Islam, the Muslim Arabic world, and political Zionism, the State of Israel, mutually destroy each other. Meanwhile, the other nations, once more divided on this issue, will be constrained to the fight to the point of complete physical, moral, spiritual, and economical exhaustion. We shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm, which in all its horror will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism, origin of savagery. On the other hand, in case the Third World War happens, what to do? How to stop a group of people with so much power? This is when we have to take a look to our ancestors, to the history, to see what has been done to address critical situations of extreme emergency. then we realize the just protest, the just demonstrations are not gonna give us the victory. The action that we have to carry out is a real revolution, a coup, to take the Congress of every respective country and to force to our politicians to stop this war. Every revolution has a process. First comes the idea, then the dissemination and mobilization. This is the diplomatic and peaceful way, which is used to try to change the situation in a non-violent way. But when this phase fails, and we are also in a context of international emergency, as a global nuclear conflict, unfortunately, the situation requires decisive action to try to prevent such cataclysm. It's a long time since we have been carrying out peaceful protest, which unfortunately have failed to stop this genocidal elite. If we really want to stop this mess, we have the option of an international coup in the respective countries and to force to our politicians to not carry out this new world war and the next destruction of all nuclear weapons. In reference to the elite, to judge to all the guilties of this economic crisis and hunger as the Rockefellers, Rothschild, Morgan's families, between others. So the first thing we must do is to spread the message of the coming of the Third World War and at the same time the idea of to take the Congress through social network squares and get the highest number of people in favor of this initiative. The second, to contact the police and armed forces with pamphlets to convince them to join us in this struggle to avoid World War III. Otherwise, we will be alone and we will have to fight against police and armed forces. The chaos is guaranteed because that's what they want. To cause a cataclysm that affects us in every way, with spread unemployment, food shortages, chaos. They want to take us to the end. When all seems lost, when we are dragging on the ground without food, lost, exhausted, hopeless, then to offer us the solution to the problem they created.